Imagine spending months, maybe, I don't know, even years, building something you're really passionate about. You launch it, you're excited, and then crickets. Or worse, you find out it doesn't actually fix the problem you thought it did. All that effort kind of wasted.
Yeah, it's a painful thought. But now, flip that. Imagine taking the core of that idea, spending just a few days maybe, knocking together a really rough version,
Like, super rough.
super rough,
Yeah.
and putting it in front of, say, 5 people. And in just one afternoon, boom, you find out the critical flaw or the key insight you needed before sinking all that time and energy.
That's prototyping in a nutshell, right? That immense power.
Exactly. And that's our deep dive today. Prototyping, specifically for designers, but really for anyone building something. How to build, how to test, fast, effectively, and crucially, without needing to write code.
Right. We've gone through the material you sent over, trying to pull out the real core ideas, what they are, the different kinds, the tools, how to actually test them properly.
Yeah, the mission today is basically to distill all that down. What is a prototype really? What forms does it take? What tools make it easy? How do you make one that actually teaches you something? And then how do you run a simple test? Think of it as like your shortcut to getting this essential skill down.
Okay, let's jump in. First things first, what actually is a prototype? Because I feel like lots of people think it's just like a mini version of the final thing.
Yeah, that's a super common misconception, and the sources really hit this hard. It's not a mini product. It's more like a simulation.
The simulation, okay.
Its whole value comes from being safe and incredibly fast, a way to test your main idea before you actually commit serious resources and time and money to building the real deal.
Got it. So the goals are simple then. Make it visual, let people interact with it somehow, and just get feedback.
Exactly. Visualize the concept, simulate the interaction, and gather that feedback. That's the loop. And getting it early, before the big investment, that's the key.
And it's not about showing off how slick it looks either.
No, definitely not, especially early on. The purpose isn't to impress. It's purely to learn. Does this concept even make sense? Where do people get tripped up? What dumb assumption did I make that learning is everything?
Okay, so if it's a simulation for learning, what forms can it take? The materials mentioned a spectrum of fidelity.
Yeah, fidelity is a good word for it. Think of it like resolution, from blurry to sharp.
Yeah.
And picking the right level is, well, pretty important.
So what's at the blurry end?
Right at the beginning, you've got paper prototypes. Almost sounds silly, right?
Like actual paper, sketches.
Literally. Sketches on paper, maybe sticky notes. You just draw the screens, the elements, and you physically walk someone through the flow, swapping pieces of paper.
Okay, wow. So speed is the big advantage there.
Huge advantage. They're incredibly fast to make and change. Perfect for those very, very early conversations, just exploring if the basic idea even resonates.
All right, what's the next step up from paper?
Then you get into low fidelity, or lo-fi, digital prototypes. This is where you might take simple wireframes, like basic boxes and lines showing layout.
Maybe done in something like Figma?
Exactly. Figma's great for this.
Yeah.
You connect those basic screens together to create a clickable flow. You're not worrying about colors or fonts yet, just the structure. Does the navigation make sense? Can people figure out how to get from A to B?
Makes sense. Good for testing the core logic. And then the other end, the sharp end of the spectrum.
That's high fidelity, or hi-fi. These look and feel much closer to the final product. They've got the visual design, the branding, sometimes even animations, transitions, little micro interactions.
Okay, so when would you use those?
You'd use hi-fi for more detailed usability testing, like refining specific interactions. Or maybe to show developers exactly how a complex animation should work. It's also good for getting buy-in sometimes, because it feels more real.
But there's a danger there, right? You could spend ages polishing a hi-fi prototype.
100%. And that's probably the biggest trap. The core advice from the sources is always, resist the temptation to overbuild. Choose the lowest fidelity that will actually get you the answers you need right now.
Lowest fidelity for meaningful feedback. Got it. Don't gold plate it too early.
Precisely. Speed to learning is the name of the game.
Which brings us neatly to tools, because making these things seems way more accessible now. Lots of options.
Oh, definitely. The barrier to entry is so low. The sources mentioned Figma, which we just talked about, great for those click-throughs. Then there's Framer, which is apparently really good for creating more realistic, almost code-like micro-interactions. And others too, like Protopie, Marvel, InVision for building, and then tools like Maze, specifically designed for testing prototypes remotely.
That sounds like a lot of tools to learn. Do teams really need all of them?
Well, the practical advice that came through was probably not. Honestly, for most teams, most of the time, Figma is likely enough.
Really? Just Figma.
Yeah, you can do basic wireframes, connect screens for lo-fi testing, and even build out pretty convincing hi-fi interactive mockups. The key isn't having the fanciest tool, it's just using something effectively to build and test quickly. Speed, again.
Right. Focus on the speed and the learning, not the software. So, okay, let's talk about the learning part. What actually makes a prototype testable? Because you said earlier you're not really testing the UI design itself, right?
Exactly, that's such a critical point. You're not testing pixels, you're testing assumptions. Your hypotheses about your users. What do you believe they need? How do you think they'll behave? The prototype is just the instrument you use to see if those beliefs hold up in reality.
Okay, so if it's an instrument for testing assumptions, what does it need? What makes it a good instrument?
It needs a few things. One, it has to present a clear task for the user. You can't just show it to them and say, what do you think? You need to give them a goal, like try to sign up for this service or find the contact information.
Makes sense. Give them something specific to do.
Two, it needs to feel real enough. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it needs enough realism to trigger their natural behaviors and reactions. If it's too obviously fake or broken, they might act differently.
Okay, real enough. What else?
Focus.
Yeah.
This is huge. You need to strip away everything that's not relevant to the specific question you're asking with this test.
So keep it lean.
Critically lean. The sources were really clear on this. Ideally, a good prototype is built to answer just one specific question at a time.
One question per prototype. That sounds really focused. Can you give an example?
Sure. Let's say your big question is, will people understand our new onboarding flow? Your prototype should only include the screens and steps for signing up and initial setup. Don't build the dashboard, don't build settings, don't build features, just the onboarding.
Okay, isolate that part of the experience.
Exactly. Or if you're testing, say, a complicated checkout process, maybe you start the user right at the cart or even at the payment screen. You don't make them browse the whole site first if browsing isn't what you're testing.
You're isolating the specific decision point or interaction you're uncertain about.
Precisely. Good prototypes isolate. But the great prototypes, they generate insight. They don't just show you that something failed. They give you clues as to why it failed, what the user was thinking, what they expected. That's the gold.
Okay, this is making a lot more sense. So we've built this focused assumption testing prototype. Now, how do we actually run the test? It sounds like it might be simpler than setting up a whole lab.
Oh, way simpler. You absolutely don't need a fancy usability lab or, a PhD in human-computer interaction. The sources lay out a really straightforward, effective method.
All right, walk us through it step by step.
Okay, step one. Give the user that specific task we talked about. Try to achieve X using this. Step two, and this is maybe the most important part, ask them to think out loud.
Just narrate their thoughts.
Yeah, encourage them to say whatever comes into their head as they're looking at the screen and trying to do the task. Okay, now I'm looking for a button. I don't see it. Maybe it's under this menu. That running commentary is pure gold.
Right, because it tells you their thought process, their confusion points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Step three, while they're doing that, you watch. Watch their screen, watch their cursor movements. If you can, watch their face for reactions, confusion, frustration, surprise.
And step four, this sounds like the hard one.
It is. Step four is resist the urge to help or interrupt. Just shut up and take notes. Detailed notes. What do they say? What do they click on? Where do they pause?
Become an observer, not a guide. Just document.
You got it. And then finally, step five. After they've either completed the task or maybe they got stuck and gave up, then you can ask a couple of simple wrap-up questions. The key ones mentioned are what, if anything, was confusing and what felt particularly smooth or easy.
Nice and simple. Just capture the highs and lows from their perspective. And you don't need tons of people for this, right?
No, not at all. The consistent advice is to test with just 3 to 5 users.
Only 3 to 5. Really?
Right. Yeah, it's surprising, but you'll uncover the vast majority of the major usability problems with just that small group. You start seeing the same issues pop up again and again very quickly.
Right.
More users after that often give diminishing returns, especially early on.
Wow, okay. That makes it feel incredibly achievable for, any team, really.
Totally.
So let's pull back a bit. Thinking about everything we've covered, the speed, the learning, the different types, the testing, what are the really big overarching benefits here? Why should someone listening make this a core part of how they work?
Well, I think fundamentally it shifts what you're building confidence in. Early on, it's less about, is this product perfect? And more about, do I truly understand the problem and the user? That's huge.
Building confidence in your understanding first.
Yeah. And practically, it saves just enormous amounts of time and money by catching bad ideas or flawed approaches super early, before development. It dramatically reduces the risk of launching something nobody wants or can use. Ultimately, it just makes you a smarter, more effective designer or product person or developer, anyone involved in building things.
The sources seem pretty clear that this isn't just a nice-to-have
Oh,
practice.
they were blunt.
Yeah.
It's not optional. It's presented as absolutely essential. One source even called prototyping your secret weapon.
Your secret weapon. I like that. For learning fast, reducing risk, building smarter.
Couldn't say it better.
Yeah.
And, the journey doesn't end just with the test. The next step, which the sources hinted at, is taking all that feedback, especially the critical stuff, the stuff that maybe stings your ego a bit.
Yeah, that can be tough.
For sure. But taking that and using it to iterate, to make the idea better. And that involves learning how to handle critique constructively, how to separate your ego from the idea.
Which sounds like a fascinating topic for another time. But sticking with today and wrapping this up, if prototyping is fundamentally about learning, about speed, about using it as this secret weapon, here's a thought to leave everyone with. How does really embracing the idea that a prototype might fail, that its purpose is to be critiqued and maybe even torn down early, how does that mindset shift fundamentally change your entire approach to design and building?
Yeah, thinking of it not as something you need to defend, but as a tool specifically designed to find flaws quickly. It changes everything. It requires some vulnerability, maybe, but it unlocks so much speed and ultimately leads to better products because you're course correcting constantly based on real feedback, not just assumptions.
A powerful shift indeed. Well, this has been a fantastic deep dive. Thanks for walking us through the world of prototyping.
My pleasure. Lots to think about.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Until next time.